You treated Will Smith.
Yep. And after that,
Hello, 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 and welcome to episode 2 of Gratitude City, where we go to get good vibes, feel motivated and uplifted, and be a part of a community with the mission to be good, be nice, be kind, and shine a bright light on the world. Here with me today is my friend, fellow Rotarian, and miracle worker, the one, the only, Kim Brouzes. Kim is the owner and lead therapist at Active Therapy Plus, and an absolutely sparkling soul who brings so much good into this world in so many different ways. Kim, thank you very much for being here with me today.
thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure. Honestly, we've known each other for such a long time, and we've seen a lot of each other, and you've helped me in a lot of ways. And we have that bedside chatter, right?
Yep.
But this is the first time that I feel, but you're also treating 8 other people at the time. So there's not a lot of opportunity to deep dive.
That's right.
And so I'm very happy that we get to take this opportunity to, I get to know you a little better, and maybe ask some questions or hear some stories that not a lot of people would necessarily know. So again, thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me today, and let's jump right into it.
Sounds good.
Let's start right at the beginning, build a little foundation. What kind of things were you into as a kid? Like, tell me about the 14 to 19-year-old Kim.
Ooh, interesting. So that would be my high school years. So I grew up in Elliott Lake, so it was a relatively small town. And at that point in time, I was into everything in a sense. All the sports we had in the city. Now we didn't have the sports for girls that they do now. We didn't have hockey, we didn't have chill or jam basketball, but soccer was really big at the time. Swimming was really big. ELAC was the swim team. And so I did those sports. I went to high school, obviously. I worked as a lifeguard. I started working when I was 14 years old, and worked towards teaching swimming lessons and lifeguarding myself, and kept busy. I started at 6:30 in the morning. We were picked up, went to swim, walked to school, basically went to school all day, swam again, either worked, went home, did your homework. So from 14 to 19, I had a pretty structured, pretty fast-paced life, actually.
Packed. And one common theme along all of that is high levels of physical activity, sport, and just generally high physical output.
Yes.
And mental output and collaborative output, because all of those team sports. And so basically sports and motion and movement have been ingrained in you.
Yes.
Since you were a wee little lass.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Little Kimmy in Elliott Lake playing sports when she's like 4 years old.
Yeah. I didn't like to dance. My mom started me in ballet.
Naturally.
The choo-choo came off and I never went back. So dance I do not do.
So that is a pretty, it seems like a pretty natural progression then, is as you got older, what you were passionate about, i.e. sports, would become your profession, since you're passionate about sports and movement. So the natural progression is to do that professionally. Obviously, professional athlete isn't in the realm of possibilities for a lot of people, but you're almost right there, because you make sure athletes are able to operate at the capacity they need to operate. So what drew you to sports medicine? Like, I know you wanted to be involved in sports, but why sports medicine and therapy and active therapy?
Well, the funny thing is my mom found a book from, I don't know if they still have them around, but basically every year your parents would stick your school picture, sports you're in, your best friends, and they would comment on these books. And my mom just recently gave me mine, and It went from veterinarian to doctor to sports medicine to sports therapy. And the reason that came about for me, believe it or not, is I didn't think I was smart enough to be a physician. So I didn't think being a doctor was ever in the cards for me. And so the natural progression from that is go, okay, I can't do medicine because I'm not smart enough. So what other professions are similar? And of course, physiotherapy, chiropractors, those were the two big ones, and they still are. But at the time, chiropractors and physios weren't in the sports world, right? There wasn't such thing as sports chiro and sports physio. So I kept looking, and sports therapy was an option. So after my degree, so after I did my degree in kinesiology, I had the opportunity to move to Kitchener. And in Kitchener, there was a facility, half of it was physio and half of it was sports medicine. And when I did the time with the physio, not that it wasn't interesting, but the relationships weren't made. It was a very, I don't want to say there was a lack of closeness, but I didn't feel that the therapist really knew the people. And then I went to the sports therapy side, and the women's Olympic softball team was being treated there. And it was loud, and people were laughing and crying, and there was energy. And the sports therapist knew about their jobs, their families, what car they drove. And the conversations just led to this really neat ability to create a healing environment that wasn't sterile necessarily.
Right.
And it was that energy and those relationships that drew me to the sports therapy world.
And that's interesting because maybe that speaks a little bit, like that difference of environment. Maybe that speaks to the kind of like the baseline or underlying kind of attitude and mentality of people that go into high level sports, or
Sure.
go into sports in general, is kind of like, I'm not stereotyping in any way and talking about, but generally, as being a person who's been around sports my whole life as well, you know, there is a jovialness, if that's a word, and like a camaraderie that is formed amongst teammates, and like the relationship between an athlete and their sports therapist has a vibe to it, like,
for sure.
So whereas maybe physio, you have not just athletes, but you have everybody else, and not everybody else, you know, there's always that differential in the way that humans communicate or feel comfortable communicating. So so that's an interesting take, that the atmosphere, obviously the atmosphere in which we work is something that's very important. And when you go as niche as sports, you really get that kind of sports culture and everything that comes along with it injected into your day-to-day, which based on your entire life is basically your comfort zone, right?
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, at those levels, your strength and conditioning coach and your therapist, they're the ones that will make or break your career.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like, so if you're not ready for training camp, or there's an injury that you can't recover from, you're done. So there's a lot of trust there. There's a huge trust factor with that team and the agent. And, you know, like when Quentin Byfield, for example, when his agent contacted us as the Sudbury Wolves, it was imperative that there was fascial stretching available to him, because that was something that worked for him in the past.
And every athlete is different, is going to have different needs.
You got it.
It's almost like one of the biggest examples of one treatment won't fit two people perfectly.
Yeah, for sure.
It might work for the like 75% crossover or whatnot, but for you to be like, you have to intimately know that athlete's needs.
Yes.
And then tailor a treatment plan around that. And you obviously made the right choice going into your field, because you've become somewhat of a household name in the sports therapy and active therapy world. How would you say you made the name for yourself as the best in the biz, which has led you working to these with these NHL players, with the Sudbury Five, the Sudbury Wolves, Laurentian University. What do you think made you stand out or build the relationships that where all these pros and the people who are at the highest of the high levels are going to you for like to keep them going and keep them moving?
I think it started with some of my choices early on. 3 years before I actually started sports therapy, I joined the Sudbury Wolves as the first female in the OHL. And so I got
Groundbreaker.
Yeah. So I had that contact. You got to remember, the Mike Smith went through there. Mike Fisher went through there. The Foligno boys went through there. So I got to see at the time the biggest in terms of semi-pro, pro level we had in Northern Ontario. I got my feet wet literally before I ever made the leap into athletic therapy. And in my first year of athletic therapy, so I'm now, think about this, I'm in Oakville and school. Peter Campbell, who is the coach of the men's basketball team here at Laurentian, he asked me to travel with them. So what I would do is I would meet them at the Southern Ontario University because I was already down south,
right? And
I would travel home for the home games. So I was already starting relationships while I was in school. And you get not a name for yourself, but I strategically placed myself with teams, the Ticats, for example, teams that I could replicate when I came home. And I didn't do, the National Ballet. I didn't do, because there wasn't anything to mirror that.
You couldn't scale that. You couldn't scale that back out when you came home.
Yeah. So I strategically got those contacts and those experiences. And when I came back to Sudbury, I stayed with the OHL. I stayed with the Wolves. And so, of course, now you're seeing different athletes coming into the NHL. And when I came home, the very first pro athlete I had was Brian Savage. And he broke his neck with the Montreal Canadiens.
Right.
And at the time, he was in his off season, and the AT, so athletic therapy is what's behind the bench in the NHL, the NFL, the CFL, right. OHL, et cetera, et cetera. So when the AT for Montreal contacted me, he's like, I'm sending home Brian. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what? So my first injury is a broken neck.
You were the AT behind him coming back from that broken neck?
So yeah, so I did all the behind the scenes therapy for Brian Savage. So not a wrist or an ankle or a knee. I got
no big deal, just a
broken neck. So in you go, right?
And that was big. Like Brian was like he was a big name player.
Absolutely.
Like that was a huge deal when he got hurt.
Yeah. And so it was you learn, your very first experiences are all learning ones, and they're all ones that you can make mistakes on. Knock on wood, I didn't. But it's every time you work on a different athlete, a different genre of sport, or let's say just a different body in general, you pull information, right? And you're pulling those experiences back in. And once I worked with Brian, it was Andrew Burnett, because he was with Minnesota. And it kind of, and then a friend of mine from Elliott Lake, Jeremy Stevenson, he played with Anaheim at that time. So I got, it was a natural pull. I was really the only AT in the community in Northern Ontario. And I don't want to say I got lucky, but I think the timing is I got lucky. And I, a lot of these doors opened for me because I had started working with Brian, and I was still affiliated with the Sudbury Wolves.
Yeah, that seems like the big break.
Yes.
Is the Brian Savage neck injury, because like what better word of mouth is there than a top tier NHL player coming back from a broken neck, and he's going to tell everybody, Kim took my neck from being broken to now I can play hockey again.
Yeah.
So now all of the people all the athletes in Sudbury are going to be like, well, that seems like the natural person to to go
You have to remember when you're working with athletes and you are a parent of, and we know that in the hockey world, every parent thinks their child is going to the NHL or the CFL or whatever the sport is. But one thing that worked in my favor as well is if I was affiliated with the Sudbury Wolves, I must have been good. So
Right.
they contact and say, okay, well, my son hurt his knee. Who should I go to? Well, there's this girl that's working with the Sudbury Wolves, and it's just a natural thought process, right? That, okay, well, if she's working with our best athletes, then we want her to treat our son or our daughter or whatever. So that's kind of how that evolved a little bit as well.
That is. Plus, there's always, I know doesn't really play into things, but there's always that chance that being a 33-year-old man, I fanboy hard when I go in there and like Bertuzzi's sitting in the chair or the Sudbury Five guys are sitting in the chairs. So like as a kid, right?
Oh, for sure.
There's a 12, 13, 14-year-old athlete who like idolizes these people, like to go in there and be getting worked on like next to these dudes, like that's got to be the coolest feeling in the world. If it's to me at 33, it must be like the absolute coolest to like a 12-year-old like AAA stud, who's coming in.
Oh, for sure. Yep.
And he's chopping it up with Bertuzzi. Like, what are you in here for? Right?
It's a pretty fun environment.
Yeah, super cool. So one story that I've kind of started to hear, but I haven't really heard a lot of, just like around the clinic, is you've been involved with the the Canadian Olympic team or committee, right?
Yes. So I've worked with a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot. In a small town, I've worked with quite a few Olympic athletes. I had considered being I had considered going several times. I've done the Pan Am Games. Yeah, I've done the Pan Am Games. I've done some of the smaller venues.
For what?
But it's as a mom.
No, for what sport?
So I've worked with soccer, I've worked with hockey. So I've worked with field hockey. So with the Pan Am Games, we were kind of like spread out across a lot of different venues. A lot of times I work just in the athletes village on the athletes.
At the Pan Am Games.
Not so much with a team.
At the Pan Am Games. In the village.
And it's fun. So it's a very different type of treatment though. When I'm working with an athlete in the clinic, I'm going to take them from point A all the way to point Z, right?
Yeah.
When you're working with someone else's athlete or a different country, different, I may get them once.
And they need something way more acutely than like they need to run a race like tomorrow.
That's right. So you're not taking them from the point of injury to the point of recovery, right? It's completely different. So you only get them for that moment in time. So you have to do all the work you can in that moment of time, but you also have to backtrack. So if you've got a hockey player and their game against Russia is Friday and they're coming to you on a Wednesday, you have to say, I've got 48 hours. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, well, I can't create a healing process. I can't create a trauma. I don't even really have the luxury of creating a discomfort. So I have to try to get them the best they can, knowing that within 48 hours, they've got to be the best they can.
So you have to in 48 hours or whatever that time may be, you have to treat, you have to diagnose, treat, and allow for some kind of recovery time.
You got it.
Because whatever, you can't be going into a performance scenario hindered.
Sore. And sore from your treatment.
Yeah.
Right. So as you know, when you come to see me, the expectation is there's going to be up to 4 days of soreness.
Right.
And that's what it takes for the body to recover, which is the reason you're coming to see me. But in certain situations, when with my Sudbury Wolves or my Sudbury Five, you try to create those treatments on the Monday, maybe the Tuesday, same as when you're doing a race.
Yeah.
And you're creating that, you're settling down into your week, right?
Yeah.
And you know that, okay, well, I can't run my hardest on Thursday because my race is on Saturday. So I'm going to figure that out Monday, Tuesday. Well, I have to do the same thing with tissue work.
Right.
So there's a natural, process throughout the week where there's things I can and can't do depending on that timing. And that's the same when you're working in a season or when you're working at a major games.
Right. Back to the Pan Am athletes or the people just in general. In the village scenario who are at a competition and there's a therapist treating them who isn't their normal therapist. Will you take on kind of the responsibility of that, or will you consult with that person's therapist and try and get what their approach has been, or you just basically trust the athlete to let you know what kind of has been going on, and then you can then make the judgment call on what that athlete needs on that day or those 2 or 3 days?
Yeah. So athletes at that level come in with a pretty good grasp at what's worked. They have chosen whether it's their therapist for their team or somebody in their community, and they trust them. So we can't do just about anything. At a major game or during that week leading into a competition, you don't get to try new things. So I put a lot back onto the athlete. Let's say, for example, Rebecca Johnson. So she was here a few weeks ago. She likes dry needling. Yeah. She was heading back to Calgary to start training again. It wasn't the time for me to say, let's not dry needle. Yeah. Let's try this technique. Right. Because they rely heavily on the success of things that has worked from prior injuries.
Right. And back to the point that every single body, every single athlete, every single person is different, and really at the end of the day, know what is generally will work with their body.
You got it.
And then the therapist then uses that information and works within those kind of.
She believed greatly that her hips released best with dry needling. It wasn't my job to convince her otherwise. At that point in time, you are their healthcare provider.
Yeah.
So you provide them with, so I am a sub-in. So whether I'm at a major games or I'm working with somebody who has a strength and conditioning and an AT from another team, I am rented. I am subbing in that care.
Yeah.
It's not my job to recreate it. It's my job to administer it.
Right.
So yes, I rely very heavily on what has worked for that athlete in the past.
Right. And so on that kind of note, the human body is one of the most complex organisms on Earth. I mean, just think about all of the systems that are happening in here, right? And all of the intricacies and the interactions. And knowledge on the body is evolving every single day, every year, as we get new technologies and new insights. How do you keep up with all of the complexities, the new info, the best practices, the new tech in sports and active therapy?
I do that in a couple ways. One, I've had the privilege of being a faculty member at the Northern Ontario School of Medicine since its inception in 2006. So I have that avenue of information. So I teach anatomy and musculoskeletal assessment. So the newest in terms of textbook.
I didn't know that. But BT Dubs. I've known you for over a decade, and I didn't know that you were like an OG at Awesome.
Yeah. Actually, I believe I'm still the only athletic therapist that works at a med school. So
wow, first OHL, women in the OHL, first.
Yeah. So but that allows me that research information, that forum of education. Right. That's one way. Another way is, of course, working with my high level athletes and having contact with their agents and their strength and conditioning therapy teams back with their teams. So that information, like when Tyler Bertuzzi's strength and conditioning guy came to Sudbury to check on him, I get all that information. His workouts, his, what his tests are going to be, how they're testing. Because then we have to go and make sure he's training to excel at that, which, by the way, he's doing spectacular this season.
Yo, shout out to Tyler Bertuzzi. He had a completely breakout year last year, and he's kind of setting himself up for a nice little career in the NHL.
Yeah. So
shout out Tyler.
That's another way. And the other thing is when you're in any field really, but in healthcare specifically, we have to do something called continuing education credits, or units, CEUs.
Right.
So I've taken that a little differently. I have a different philosophy for those education credits. A lot of people will take them to learn a new technique or a new skill. And I take a different philosophy in the sense that I don't think learning a different way to tackle the same problem is necessarily a benefit. To me, I think I need to know how to diagnose properly. I need to know how to figure out what the problem is. The one thing is complex as the body is, which is true, it still runs the same way. Now we have variable issues, definitely, like environmental, electronics. There's different stressors in our world than there was 25 years ago and 40 and 50 years ago from there.
Right.
However, and they do alter the way the body works, there's no doubt. And,
for sure.
Toxicity levels and diseases and all those things.
Yeah.
But if you can diagnose the problem properly, then I don't know if having a million ways to treat it is the answer. So I go at more of the way to diagnose. I take
like
more
to troubleshoot. You focus on troubleshooting and more so figuring out kind of the deep underlying issue.
Yeah.
Because just like in any problem scenario, addressing and fixing a byproduct will never be the same as solving a root issue, right?
You got it.
So that's kind of the analogy that I'm kind of pulling from what you're saying.
Yeah. And I have surrounded myself with some of the best in Sudbury. So if I can't figure it out or I don't have that tool, I have physiotherapy. I have, Dr. Vey, who's a naturopath. I have Ashley, who is a nutritionist, and she attacks things with food and what the body is or isn't absorbing. I have massage therapy. I have, Mike is my new fascial stretching therapist. So
and Josh, shout out Josh.
Josh, right?
Josh, my man, Josh.
Yeah, so it's a team approach. If I can't figure it out, I've got some of the best here that can.
You've created yourself a pretty powerhouse little team right there in that little clinic. Yeah, it's.
I'm very proud of them all.
It must be so cool to have this like intimate knowledge of the human body. Like I said, this whole thing is one complex, ultra complex machine, and to have an intimate knowledge of it and how to fix it and how to treat it and different ways of looking at it, it's almost like a superpower, right?
Yeah, I guess.
You're healing people.
Yeah.
What would you say is, without mentioning any names, of course, what stands out as like the most profound or rewarding impact that you've been able to have on someone physically?
I think it's my non-pro athletes, my regular everyday people who are in chronic pain. So the ones that don't have a diagnosable trauma, they didn't fall down any stairs, their MRI isn't showing a black and white answer. But nonetheless, they're in incredible pain and they just don't know why. And when they come in for treatment, basically what I'm doing is I'm setting the tissue up for, trying to figure out, is it an adhesion? Is it a blood flow restriction? Is it an old trauma that's coming back to bite you? Those ones who have no hope and really had no direction those are the ones that walk out and, you know, they give you the hug and, you know, they give you that genuine thank you. And you really do have, I really do have the honor every day to change those lives. And yeah, it's really cool to work with, you know, the Tyler Bertuzzi's and the Brian Savages. But as cool as that is, the reward and the reason I do it is for that person who walks out just as an everyday person that, you know, thanks you and gives you that hug for, you know, making them pain free.
Free from pain. You're giving like freedom of mobility, freedom to move, freedom to like, how do you live life to the fullest when you're limited by your range of motion or pain? Like,
you don't.
I've been carried in to your clinic before.
Yeah.
I have had to have been carried into your clinic.
Yeah.
And I leave on my own 2 feet. Like that's something special that's like a gift that you get to give. And
I like that. Yeah.
It speaks to like your human nature, that is the value that you take out of your day to day, is you're giving people like the gift of movement, basically. Yeah.
And I'm blessed, right? Like I get to meet some of the most amazing humans, and again, the non-pro ones. And I, you know, in forums like this where I get to talk is when I have that opportunity to tell people that they leave with me as much as I'm giving to them when they walk out the door, right? Whether it's a piece of legal advice or a joke, or, you know what I mean? Or a relationship, like a friendship like yours, right? Like it's a give and take. It's not that I'm just always giving. I'm taking from every one of those experiences as well.
I said at the beginning of the show that you're an amazing person, Kimmy, and like that sentence that you just said, oh my God, that's just beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've covered that you're an absolutely you're a very busy person. You're just as when you were younger, your performance was your athletic life was high performance. Your business life is high performance. I've been in the clinic. You do not stop moving. You must log 30 kilometers a day of movement around that clinic.
Yeah.
It's go time, right? And with how busy you are professionally, you also log a serious amount of time and energy just putting on for your community. You're involved with and have supported Epilepsy Sudbury with your Purple Jersey campaign, with the 5, where the boys wore custom purple jerseys and then auctioned them off after. You've supported the NOFCC with Tyler's mask campaign, which was super cool, by the way. Super cool, by the way. I'm gonna have Dylan superimpose in a picture of me wearing the mask. You're volunteering on the YMCA's My Wires Resilient campaign, and you're a Rotarian. When COVID hit, you started an initiative where you provided RVs for frontline nurses, so that they could sleep in their driveway and not expose their families. And as recently as yesterday, you gave me an entire bag of brand new winter gloves to give out at our overnight warming center. What is your motivation, given how much you have going on in your life? What's your motivation to be such an active and engaged member of the community?
The reason is if I go back to what the community has given me, they've given me the ability to put food on my table, to have a really good life. I don't do without, my girls don't do without. So if I had started a clinic in another community, I could have been in Toronto, I could be in Montreal. I don't think I would have what I have now if it wasn't for my community. So it's important for them to know that. And so, and you got to remember, I don't do this for the money. And I have times where I don't charge. I charge what you can pay. I have doctor's offices that will call me and say, I need a favor. That's code for the person I'm sending you has no coverage. So the treatments that I do aren't for the rich and famous, but with that said, it's still giving me a very, very, very good life. And that's because the community trusts me, has put faith in me. And even when they couldn't get their money back, still paid for their visits. So it's important to me to give back every opportunity I can. And I have created those relationships with community members like Jerry Lougheed, my doctors, my pro athletes. So when things like campaigns for the Y and Tyler Bertuzzi and the RVs, I knew that I was the one that should do it, and I was the one that's capable of doing it. And it was very important to me to give back when I can. And the nice thing about what's changed with social media is you would never know that somebody was struggling, somebody, needed help with a surgery for their dog, or they're running for cystic fibrosis. Or so the nice thing is you can throw, whatever money you can afford at a whole bunch of things, because people are putting it on Facebook and the GoFundMe pages and the sponsorship pages. And, so there's so many ways that people can give back. And that's a way that I can give back to individuals as well as bigger organizations. So
and the community at large, basically. Yep. Just you, Sabri did good by you, and you want to do good by Sabri.
Absolutely.
And give back.
Absolutely.
And on top of all of that, you're still a mom.
Yep. 3 girls.
I've been in the clinic plenty of times with little Quinn running around and bouncing on Angela's lap, and God bless her, Angela still gets everything done that she has to do while making sure Quinny is happy and taken care of.
Yep.
And that to me just speaks to your nature of just getting bleep done. Just get it done, regardless of how it looks.
Yep.
What other strategies do you use to juggle this crazy schedule and keep all the balls in the air?
Well, I can't say I do that one alone. When Torrance and Madden were young, their grandmother did a lot for me. So all 3 of my girls were raised for the first 2 years, basically in the clinic. So when I had Torrance and Madden, so my first 2, I created a room and they came to work with me. I nursed them both for 17 months. And they, my patients were good. There were signs saying, if you hear the baby cry and I leave for 5 or 10 minutes, I've gone to nurse the baby and I'm coming back. And nobody ever, said, oh, you were gone too long, anything. So it was really well. It was a lot easier than what you'd expect, right? It was. Well,
it's almost more efficient because when your babies are at your work.
Yeah. Right. But I got to raise them. I got to be with them, but I still got to be at work helping other people, because I didn't have the luxury of being paid to be at home. Right. I'm self-employed and I'm a mom.
And you generally have a burning passion in your soul to help people, right?
Absolutely.
Because let's not demonize or talk ill about someone who's just passionately driven to do work, right?
Yeah. So I didn't really have another option. I wasn't willing to give my babies up as babies to a daycare. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't, I had babies to have babies, right? So I still needed to be involved in that first 2 years in the capacity that maybe not that I was at home, but still that they bonded with me. But the nice thing that worked out really well is all 3 of my girls, having had like a mom 2.0, is that they are independent and they are strong, and there's no, even though there's a bond with me, there's not a dependency on me.
Right.
right? So I think it's created pretty neat humans. And I hope for the, more women can do that, because you keep your identity, there's less resentment. And I still got to raise my girls. I got to nurse them as long as I needed to. And let's be honest, I would have made a terrible mom at home. Like I went back, I only took 2 weeks off with my first two and 9 days with my third. And my third was a C-section.
And how crazy that is. I think another thing that your girls are your girls saw is the importance of, and it speaks to what you're kind of talking about, is that they see that it's important for us to maintain what makes us us and what sets our soul on fire. Because that is important, because when a parent sacrifices everything they are and everything that makes them tick, as much as that might be the natural way for parents to kind of express their love, let's say, to their kids. There could be some subconscious, it would be subconscious resentment, right? Because we've been stripped of our essence. So what you did is you raised your kids like you wanted to, you spent time with them. They saw the passion in you and your determination to be both a great mom and also do what you love to do, because that's insane. That's not something that's necessarily extremely common. You don't even have to make the choice, right? You get kind of do both if you want to. But it's an insane amount of work and dedication to make that happen. And I think that speaks a lot to that whole community vibe that is at the core of your being, because when you see your therapist, who is not only so passionate about what she does that she is in this kind of situation, but it's like, man, Kim is like a really awesome mom. Like, look at how she's like giving me attention, but at the same time, she's not ignoring her kids. And like, this is like a really cool kind of family centric vibe here, right? And it makes you relatable to the people who would be going through something similar, and maybe even an inspiration to people who are in a similar situation, who want to spend time with their kids, but also want to work at the same time.
No, I hope. And, we're a teaching facility too, right? So we take on all different types of students from high school, college, university, post-grad.
So you got the whole age range. You got the whole thing, from babies all the way up to seniors, all the way through students, moms, teenagers, athletes, 20-somethings, 34-something dads who are running Spartans and crazy amount of damage.
Well, and you got to remember, it's society drives a lot of what we do. It doesn't make it right or wrong, and it doesn't mean it's what we see and it's what we expect. But even like you go back into so many different routines and patterns. Life's about patterns, right? And so when you see moms having to take the year off and they don't do anything but walk this community sidewalks with a stroller, that's because that's society driven. That's the expectation. But it doesn't mean that we all have to fall into that mold. There are so many ways to raise your children. There are so many ways to get back to work. And like, even pregnant, I worked out twice a day, all the way to the day I gave birth. I was back working out 9 days after my delivery. I gained 11 pounds and my baby was 8 of it. My placenta was 2. So you don't have to, so there was a time in the gym, I was bench pressing, no word of a lie. And this person comes running across the gym and says, "Miss, you can't be lying on your back." And I've got a belly out to here. And I'm like, no, I'm okay with, thank you. But to see a pregnant woman bench pressing,
putting up weight,
was like, people just looked like, what is she doing? Is she nuts? There was nothing wrong with me bench pressing when I was pregnant. I was safe. I had lowered my weight. But again, society drives what we think as a mom, and it's not fair. It shouldn't be the way it is. And so I'm breaking the mold.
And it all boils down to choice. I mean, we've touched on it a couple of times. What makes one person happy doesn't make another person, which might work for someone, which doesn't for another. And so that's the beauty of life, is that we have the freedoms and the opportunities to literally do whatever you want. You want to work out until the day you pop. You can do that. You want to take it easy and relax and do this. Great. Some people get into yoga. Some people, some people just chill. Some people eat a tub of Oreo ice cream every couple of days, because at the end of the day, at that time, women are literally factories that are producing a human being. Which is one of the most insane concepts to even.
I know, it really is.
So it's like, okay, body, you are doing the heavy lifting here. Whatever you need to feel comfortable. I agree. I'm in for it.
I agree.
And same thing with the mental, with a person like you who's been into sports and fitness and being in shape your whole life. That is where you feel the best. So not only is your body going through all these changes, but you also have to struggle with the fact that you're not doing what you want to be doing and what makes you feel good, right? So that not only do we have to feed the physical body and give it what it needs, you got to feed the mind and the emotion and the spirit too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's amazing. I just want to take this opportunity. We're talking about like amazing moms and amazing and family support and just amazing women in general. I just want to give Lesley a shout out here because I can't be who I am or do a fraction of the things that I do and get to also enjoy the life that I enjoy on every front if it wasn't for Lesley and the cover fire that she provides on the home front. She gives me a lot of freedom to fulfill my needs and to go out and be the community engager that I am and to always be on the go. And I cannot express enough the gratitude that I have for that woman. And she's literally the best wife and the best mom.
Oh, she's a good human. There's no doubt
that anyone could ever ask for. One of Lesley's old riding friends and MJ Papin. And you know MJ?
I do.
So we've recently reconnected digitally because she is at the Chamber of Commerce. She does their social media and PR. So we've recently been connected, and she comments on like pretty frequently on my posts, and a lot of them are like, Lesley deserves a Medal of Valor, or like, I don't know how Lesley does it, but and sometimes I don't even know how she does it, but she just does. Like
she's a selfless person.
She's the most she's the most selfless person.
She knows what you need and she lets you do it.
And her number one MO in life is just to make sure that like our children and our family is like strong and
solid.
But enough with the mushy stuff. What would you rank as like the star on the tree of your career, like highlight of your career thus far?
I'd say one of the ones that stands out the most, I think, was when Joel Kinnaman, he was in Suicide Squad.
Okay,
so he came to Sudbury a couple years ago to film a movie. And before Suicide Squad, so he was here and Will Smith had to come, and they were doing weapon training for, I guess, Suicide Squad. And so I had the opportunity to treat the two of them.
You treated Will Smith?
Yeah. And after that, I got in the mail, because I don't ask for anything at the time, right? I don't ask for an autograph or anything like that.
Right.
I got a signed note from Joel that called me his favorite torturess. And this was Joel. he played in a Netflix series too called The Killer or The Killing, I think. So I didn't actually know who he was ahead of time because I didn't watch a lot of television. Right. I know who he is now, but he was an incredibly respectful and humble person. But to work on somebody at that level who's had different treatments across the world, anything he needed, snap his fingers, and to be told that I was his favorite or the treatments were the best he's ever had. And to get that same comment from Will Smith, like, even though it's, it's not it was, I'd have to say, from being a small town girl, taking an underdog profession, because athletic therapy at the time when I took it, my parents didn't even know what I went to school for. They just said, well, she's not a physio, but I don't know what she is, so to be able to be seen in that kind of light, I would have to say would be the biggest thing.
That is, so when was this? I'm
going to say probably Joel might have been here in 2015, maybe.
Okay, so
right before Suicide Squad came out.
Yeah, okay. So this was like, okay, so this is like Will Smith is like one of the biggest names in the television and movie business.
Yeah, but because Joel was here filming, he couldn't leave to go to LA to do the weapons training they needed.
So wait, how does Will Smith even fit into this? Did he come, like, he's doing the weapons
here
to do weapons
here to do the weapons training with Joel to prep for Suicide Squad.
Will Smith was in Suicide Squad?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That is so. And Joel, so they're prepping for Suicide Squad, which was going to be filmed somewhere else, but Joel was here filming something.
Yes.
So Will Smith is like, yo, even though you're filming this, we got to get this training done.
You got it. Because he was he flew out of here to go to LA to start filming. They had already started filming.
So they're like, hey, you do your thing in Sudbury, and then we're going to get going. We'll start shooting your scenes when you get here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Will Smith is coming to Sudbury to do weapons training. I wonder where they even did that. Like, where would they do that? In like
I don't know. It was, I'm assuming nobody really knew because they would have had to have kept that pretty under wraps.
Down. Yeah, they got to keep that under wraps.
Yeah.
Think about how many people would be at, like, if they knew where Will Smith was going to be.
It would have been crazy. So he probably flew in private plane.
Yeah.
Did it, flew back out.
Right.
Because I think they may have been renting Zulich's home on Ramsey before the owner of Panoramic bought it. They've used that house quite often for filming and for putting up actors and stuff. Right. So they might have even been there. I'm not sure.
Right. Oh man, that's so cool. So you have told me that you're approaching the tail end of your career. Like, you're starting to think about what's coming next.
Yeah.
What do you hope or think that you will be most remembered for? Like, what do you want the Kim Brouzes stamp to be on the world?
I hope I'm remembered for giving. I hope I'm remembered for basically giving my entire career to helping people, regardless of what capacity it was in. I kind of hope to be remembered as an entrepreneur, a female that may have broken some of those boundaries, especially CFL, the OHL, and for being, I want my girls to see me as being strong and believing that you can do whatever you put your mind to, because there's no way that, when I was 14 to 17, that I was thinking I was going to be here, never alone treating actors and actresses and athletes and all the rest of it. Right. I was the girl that wasn't smart enough to get into med school.
I know. I bet you 100% were.
Yeah, and I probably can.
But you probably wouldn't have been hanging out with Will Smith, though.
That's right. So it's more just, I want people, especially my girls and women in general, to know that there isn't any boundary left anymore. There isn't. If you look at the NHL is hiring women, There are women in roles that never were before. So, you know, be strong, be independent, have your dreams, even though there might be the craziest things out there, chances are you'll achieve them if they're meant to be.
That's amazing. And that is the stamp that you've placed on my heart, Kim.
Thank you.
And so if your impact on me is extrapolated out, there's no doubt in my mind that what you want for people to think of you, once you, and you know what, I'm talking about like you dying, like when you retire, let's keep it straight. Like you're still going to be a very prominent.
Oh, I have lots of work still to do.
Yeah, you're gonna, like, your teaching is only gonna, you know, step up to the next level. And that's another cool thing, is that your legacy is living on through your students. So you're kind of injecting that approach to the game, and that expertise and that experience that makes you special. You are downloading that onto this up and coming generation of sports and active therapists. And that's got to be a super cool feeling, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, I get to mentor. That's part of my job, right?
Yeah.
So I have that so honor as well.
And it's just another thing that you give, another piece of you that you give. Now, for a couple little takeaways here for the audience, what do you think is a part of our physical and mental health that we often overlook? And how do you think that what kind of things can we do to incorporate more of that into our day-to-day?
I think there's a couple. I do think people find it tough to put physical activity in their day. And if you look at how busy I am, during a regular Sudbury 5 Sudbury Wool season, I could work 15 hours a day. I could be in an arena, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, some days. And I still manage to put 2 workouts in a day. Now, granted, I have to wake up early to get it in. So I get up at 5:30, I do my run, I go and wake my family up, get all that stuff done, take them to school, I go to work, and then I've carved out another block of time for my lunch. That's when I lift, I go pick my girls up at school, and I come back to work. So I think people struggle with the timing, and there's so many ways to do it, especially now with, you know, since COVID, and there's so many new apps and so many things you can do online, that I think people are starting to figure out how to do this in 15, 20, 25-minute increments.
Right.
With the world of Google and social media and all these other apps and stuff. So that, I think, is one thing that's getting a little bit more common. The one thing I do believe is missing is quiet. I don't think people take, especially women, take enough time to just sit in quiet and listen to nothing. And, you know, it could be the bath, but it could just honestly be quiet, and not with your thoughts, not with your children screaming, and not with the phone ringing and your da-da-da, like literally pure silence. And we have so much, and me included, so much on the go, that you're listening to music in your car, and we get adjusted to needing noise and movement and speed and da-da-da-da, which is pretty impressive because you can get a lot done. But for mental health, I think there needs to be every single day a moment of silence, and you just breathe and you pat yourself on the back for a job well done and a day well accomplished and all that other stuff, and not meet someone else's expectations, but just be glad with your own.
That, you know? And I definitely I get an F in quiet.
Yeah, I bet you do. And most of us type A personalities think that we've accomplished more by going at 100 miles an hour. And I think sometimes the drawback, now I'm like you, to put me on a pause for a week, that's the worst thing you can do for me mentally. Yeah. I need to keep moving. But they're also to lower blood pressure, to lower stress, to improve sleep. You got it.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm not saying that my way is the right way.
Oh, I know.
It was clearly, I don't think it is, but it's just something that's become so ingrained in me. And it's
exactly.
And like you said, we're listening to stuff in the car. We're like, when I do the dishes, I have my phone on the windowsill and I'm watching like disc golf tournament coverage.
Yeah.
When I go to sleep at night, I have an earphone in my ear and I just drift off to the sound of How I Met Your Mother. I don't even watch it. I just drift off to the sound because it's familiar and it's comforting.
Yep.
There is literally not 1 minute of my day that is quiet. Like not one. And to hear you say blood pressure, there's probably a ton of mental impacts and
absolutely
self-reflective benefits, and like it's definitely an area of my life that I'm consciously aware that needs improvement, but I am hesitant I feel like it's such a daunting task at this point in the game that I'm intimidated to even start the process.
Yeah. It's easier for you to go for a run than it is for you to sit somewhere quietly.
Yeah.
And other people are like, what?
Like, sign me up
I would rather sit quietly than go for a run.
Someone says right now, Chris, 10-kilometer run or sit on this couch for 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, I'm out. I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's because you regulate your hormonal levels with movement as opposed to non-movement.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
So it's just, and it is a true fact that people who
I'm not live.
People who stay active have a much harder time to slow down, and unless their week off or their time off is busy and they're being productive, they don't. And I have a hard time. By Sunday, I am feeling down almost because there isn't anything with the COVID lockdown that I can accomplish. Right. So you have to do what's best for you, but just know that when you don't have that moment to breathe, everything else is considered a stressor in your brain and in your body.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And we think it's a de-stressor.
Come here.
It's not.
I want the whole world. I'm gonna get Dylan to cut this in because I want the whole world. I want the whole world to see.
Oh, thanks, babe.
This one right here, the special, most amazing human being on the whole planet.
Aw. See ya.
Okay, so quiet and just figure a way to get some movement in. Yep. Because at the end of the day, it's not something that we're just trying to say like, hey, if you don't move, you're a bad guy. But it's generally your body's going to be happier and healthier. Yes. Your mind will be sharper.
Absolutely.
Your enjoyment of your life is up. Like it's in our best interests
to move.
Yeah. Our human body is a tool and a machine and like any tool and any machine, if it's not moved or used, it seizes.
You got it.
And then it might not be now or tomorrow or next month or next year, but if you don't move and you're 50, that's 50 years of stagnation. That's going to cause you some problems in that last third or that last quarter.
Yeah.
And human nature sometimes human nature is almost, it's like, what can I do now to satisfy myself now? So not moving in the moment might be easier or more convenient. It's hard for us to look down the road at our 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond.
Yep.
Because it's like, hey man, that's 30 years from now. Like,
I'll worry about it then.
Worry about it then. But when you get there, it's
like shit.
You can't reverse it.
No.
Thank God technology is coming and training techniques have advanced and we stand a much better chance. But if just movement is part of our lives all the way through, we're gonna have a more enjoyable life for a more prolonged period of time.
You got it.
Okay, so one more little nugget for the audience.
Okay.
What is the most common injury you see in your clinic and what can we do to prevent that?
The most common, I would say, is probably the lower back. Sometimes it's a disc. Sometimes it's the SI joint, sometimes it's musculature. We typically don't move properly, and sitting is the new smoking. And then all of a sudden you expect, so a shortened muscle is a stronger muscle. A lengthened muscle is a weaker muscle. So as you sit and you game, or you're sitting on a computer for work, or you're sitting and driving for work, you're shortening a lot of the front or the anterior structures. Then you decide you're going to go mow the lawn or wash your floors or do something that's in a different position, and just expect everything because you want it to, just to be ready to react, right? And then what happens is you have created the shortening anteriorly, so now your back gets pulled. You need your back to lift the back end of your skidoo, which you've done 400 times before. And all of a sudden it makes no sense to you. Why did my back go? I've done this many times. It doesn't make any sense. And what people assume is that it's all about that one moment, and it's not. It could be years leading in, right? It's from sitting, it's from not stretching, it's from not moving, it's from, it could be dehydration, it could be lack of sleep, could be anything. And what we have to understand, like you said, it's our body's like an engine or a machine, and we need to keep care of it, change the oil, do all those things. And if you don't, it's not going to be there when you need it to be.
So preventative maintenance, stretching. So how do I, if I'm a person that doesn't necessarily get a ton of movement in my life, how do I, or a person, let's say, take it a different angle, a person who, let's say, is in IT or has a job where they are sedentary for a lot of the day, what could that person do to make sure that when they do lift the skidoo or move their lawnmower or move their couch or whatever that action may be, how does that person make sure that their lower back or their body is ready to go, like ready to be engaged?
There's a few things they can do.
Intermittent stretching throughout the day, walking on the spot. I've seen adjustable desks.
Yes, that's a big one.
Adjustable desks seem to be making
sit stands for sure.
Sit stands. I saw this one guy. We were doing some office renovations. He had a stand-up desk and this little 3 foot by 2 foot little on the spot treadmill, like a little treadmill. So he's just there doing his work, walking along all day long. And I was like,
perfect.
That is,
I probably would fall off the damn thing, but perfect. The other thing you can do is, put something so that either an alarm goes off on your phone or something you typically need a couple times an hour, whether it be a stapler or your water bottle. Put it somewhere that you have to physically get up and move. Right.
And something that you need, because if it's not, you're just going to not do it. You're not going to go over there.
So something, the telephone, for heaven's sakes, like anything that you typically need a few times an hour, you want to get up and move. And it's harder now that with COVID and people at home, because a lot of times they would go to a photocopier or the fax machine or the lunchroom.
Commute in, walk from a parking lot.
And now you're literally going downstairs in your pajama bottoms and your dress shirt and sitting at home, and you don't have the same movements because you don't have the same conversations either.
I don't even have to go down the stairs. My office is on the main floor. So
the question is, do you have pants on? All right, you're good.
As if you called me out. I am in comfy pants. I am in comfy pants. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it up top, but I want to be as comfortable as possible to be in the zone here.
And that's a luxury of being at home, but it's also sometimes a fail because people, you've changed your routine to be a little bit more on the lazy side, we'll say. Right.
And that'll start trickling out into other aspects of your life.
Sure.
I saw this one video. It was called Start Each Day with Making Your Bed. And it's have you seen that? It's a keynote by some corporal or high-ranking military person. But something as insignificant as making your bed in the morning, as inconsequential as that seems, it actually sets the tone for the whole day. Like, how are you going to expect your body or your mind to handle adversity or to make sure you're doing things right and thoroughly if you can't make your bed in the morning, which is
That's
like
right.
the simplest task
That's right.
one could possibly imagine.
Yep.
But it does set the tone. Just like
Sure.
that's why I love working out first thing in the morning.
Me too.
Because when you put yourself through the ringer at 6 o'clock in the morning before the sun comes up, anything that happens to you for the rest of the day is going to hurt less than that. And you know that you can do it or overcome it or solve the problem.
And you've also accomplished more by the time the sun comes up than 99% of the population.
Because you already got your 12,000 steps, so everything else on top of that's a bonus.
Yep. And you'll pick things up. You'll make the beds. You're just the mindset is very true. You're ready to go.
And lastly, the final question here in Gratitude City is always, what or who are you most grateful for?
As probably typical of a response this is going to be, I would have to say my family from start to finish. My parents, because they honestly had no idea how long I was going to be in school for or what I was in school for. And they just let me do it. They let me, did 14 years of schooling, and it was never a question like, okay, are you done yet? They didn't question the day I opened the clinic and started a business. Like, are you nuts? Like, have you thought about this? I had nothing but support from my parents, and all the way down to my ex-husband and my new husband and my 3 kids. And, like I said, some days I'm gone 15 hours and I still come home to the warm house. My husband cooks, dinner's out, even though they may have eaten, you know what I mean? So they know, kind of like Lesley, they know what you need to do. They know how you have to accomplish it. They know that it's part of who you are. It's part of your mental health and maybe physical. They may not understand it. They may not get how you tick exactly. Just know that that's how you need to be who you are. And the fact that it makes you a better husband, wife, worker, father, whatever it is, right? And I need all those aspects in my world. I need the hugs. I need the one-on-one, conversations, and I need my exercise, and I need my clinic, and I need my family. They know that you need all those aspects, and they're happier that you're able to do them than resentful and mean and wishing that they were with somebody else. So right from my parents all the way to my husband and my children, I would say I am incredibly grateful to all of them.
That's amazing. And you know what? I agree with you, and that I think that will be a common response, and you get to be only number 2. So it's not that repetitive, but it speaks to the importance of the support structures around us, and the love that people have for us, and the exchange that love is, and what we put into the world, so it's going to be common for sure. I'm expecting it, but it's going to be a cool spin. Everyone's going to have their own spin on it, right? So that's going to be cool to see. Well,
so I have a question for you before we go. Who are you interviewing in episode 10?
I don't know.
So I'm going to turn this and I'm going to interview you.
Oh, deal.
So for episode 10, you and I are swapping spots.
We'll flip the script. Done. Yep. Any significance behind why you chose 10?
No, I guess in a sense, I think that there's a lot of people that are, I don't want to say good, but are that you're going to want to interview. And when you're the host, you don't necessarily want to put you in the forefront, right? But the word gratitude and what you chose and what you're choosing to speak about is you. So even though you're interviewing us, where it's coming from is you. So I think 10 is a good number because it's not at the beginning, but it's early enough for people to understand a little bit more about you as you progress into more of these podcasts.
Oh my God. Like, I'm touched by how amazing and generous of an idea that is, and I'm extremely excited because this has been a really good chat.
Yeah, it's awesome.
This has been a good chat. We're very similar in a lot of ways, in almost every single possible way, and I go into these things a little bit nervous, because interviewing per se is something that I would consider a weakness of mine. So I go in with this weird expectation of like, this is gonna be an interview and I'm not good at interviewing.
Yeah.
But and the first like 5 minutes will show that.
Yeah.
But then it's more so about getting into a conversation. And it's getting away from the mentality that this is a podcast and this is going out to the world. And it becomes more so about you and I.
That's right.
Chopping it up. And that flows into a much better conversation, which results in a better product for the audience. There was a moment in the interview where I was scrolling through these questions and I was like, hit it. And I didn't even have to look at this document that I spent like an hour and a half creating. I barely even had to look at, because it was happening naturally as the conversation progressed and flowed.
Yeah. And that's how you want them, right? You don't want a very stale conversation, because it's just not going to be as interesting to the viewer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the feedback that I got from the Ryan episode. Is there were several people that said I wasn't bored. Like, I was engaged in your conversation the whole time. And at the end of the day, when you're putting out a show or a podcast, that is the most golden thing you could possibly hear, because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to avoid at all costs, is a single moment where people are like, or because with so much that's on our minds and that's at our fingertips, if you don't keep the audience engaged or bring value to them in any way, whether it be education, entertainment, or a combination of both.
Absolutely.
They're out because there's another thing, or there's another couple of things that are gonna grab their attention.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm grateful for you, Kim, and I want to take this opportunity to express that. For everything that you do for the community, for everything that you do for me, physically and otherwise, and for giving me the opportunity to work with you and Ange behind the bench on the court as part of the training team for the Sudbury 5.
Yep.
Before we wrap this up, I want to give you an opportunity to just shout out any of your social media pages. Tell the audience how or where they can find you.
Oh, absolutely. So you could find us as the Clinic That Needs No Name. We're at 797 Lawrence Street, and we are a multidisciplinary clinic. So we have myself that does the athletic therapy and the acupuncture. I have physiotherapy, massage therapy. We have fascial stretching therapy. We have a wonderful nutritionist, Dr. Vey, who's our doctor of naturopathic medicine. And we work as a collective group. We're not in any way, shape, or form competing with each other. We take on patients, we suit them for whatever they need the most. It's not like it always starts with me and then it goes down through a flow chart. So we work really well together. We have very similar values and goals to help the community. And so anything you need, we have access to cortisone clinics, to surgeons in different communities, depending on what you need. I have relationships with most the physicians in town, so it makes it a little easier for me to navigate through diagnostic testing. And our phone number is 705-674-2222, and we take on basically anything anybody needs.
At the corner of Lorne and Martindale.
You got it.
On Lorne. A place that has seen me in my absolute worst and a place that has seen me at my absolute best. You're a consummate professional. You care deeply about your community and the people that live here. You're a kind, selfless, generous, caring, and all around amazing human being, mother, wife, coach, mentor, encyclopedia, and every other role that you fill for anyone that needs you.
Thank you.
I cannot allow this interview or conversation to end without giving a shout out to Tyler, who probably enjoyed my screeches and squeals and screams the most out of everybody, except for maybe Ange. But Tyler just became a professional referee.
Yes, he is. He's
AHL
heading whenever
ref.
the AHL opens up in Canada. We lose him, and he heads towards the AHL.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool to see. He's been dedicated to that dream for a very long time, and it's very cool to see all of the hard work,
motivated individual.
all of the hard work pay off.
Yep.
And he's an absolute unit.
Yeah, he is.
And he's an absolute unit. I love that guy. I wish him all the best. I'm gonna miss him a lot.
Yeah, we sure will.
And that's a wrap, folks. Episode 2 in the books. Thank you very much, Kim, for taking the time to chat with me today. And thank you to everybody who tuned in to jam with us. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and are able to take something away from it that will bring you value in some way. Have an amazing day.
Thanks, everybody.